This is the iPhone XS. Actually, there are two of them. The iPhone XS is an updated version of the iPhone X, and the iPhone XS Max is an updated version of the iPhone X that happens to be a lot bigger. If you already own an iPhone X, listen carefully. This video might save you $1,000. The iPhone XS is Apple's new masterpiece. It's a better phone, but it's not that much better. The iPhone XS Max is a better, bigger phone, but its bigness might not be for you. So let's get specific about what makes these new phones special. Apple will tell you that these new phones have better cameras, more powerful A12 Bionic chips, and a bunch of other small upgrades that seem easy to overlook. So we're going to focus on what matters and boil everything down to the 5 most essential improvements with the iPhone XS. First glance, you won't really notice a difference. Upon closer inspection, you'll notice 2 new antenna bands on the bottom and top of the phone. These are there because the iPhone XS has a new antenna that brings you faster data transmission. In our test, we noticed at least double the speeds. The new antenna also means that the speaker grills on the bottom of the phone are asymmetrical. Still, the speakers are supposed to sound even better than before with improved stereo effects. Otherwise, the iPhone XS looks just like the iPhone X. The iPhone XS Max, of course, is bigger with a 6.5-inch OLED display, but we'll talk more about that in a second. Another noticeable upgrade to the iPhone XS involves Face ID. We're talking about a half a second difference here, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you unlock your phone 100 times a day, that extra time adds up. The Face ID hardware is actually the same in the iPhone XS, but Apple has improved the algorithms, which improves the speed. Face ID also seems to fail less often, which cut down on how often I had to use a passcode. Let me put it another way. The new Face ID works so much better that it makes Face ID on the iPhone X seem like a prototype. But if you're upgrading from an iPhone 7 or 8, the new Face ID will feel like an extra special revelation. The same can be said about the sprawling Super Retina display. The 5.8-inch OLED display for the iPhone XS is supposed to be slightly better than the one on the iPhone X thanks to improved HDR. The same goes for the 6.5-inch iPhone XS Max display, which has slightly higher resolution thanks to its bigger size. So since the Super Retina display isn't totally new, why bring it up? Because it's going to knock your socks off if you're upgrading from an iPhone 8 or earlier, and especially if you upgrade to an iPhone XS Max. It's remarkable how losing those bezels on the top and bottom of the phone changes the way you use it. I find myself watching more videos and looking at more photos in full screen mode. I'm playing more games too because touchscreen controls are easier when you've got more touchscreen. Everything about this OLED display is better than what Apple offers with its old LCD screens. We did get a look at the new LCD display on the iPhone XR at the Apple event in Cupertino. It's not quite as good as the iPhone X, which is not quite as good as the iPhone XS. Now let's talk about the big differences. Even if you're taking the larger screen on the iPhone XS Max into account, the XS series doesn't seem dramatically different in terms of specs until you talk about the processor and the camera. Let's start with the processor. The A12 Bionic chip that comes with the iPhone XS and the iPhone XS Max is almost too powerful. It seems like most apps don't even take advantage of its full capabilities. In our benchmark tests, Apple's new 7nm processor crushed the Qualcomm Snapdragon chipsets you'll find in the Samsung Galaxy S9 and the Google Pixel 2. It also blew away the A12 Bionic processor that comes in the iPhone 8 and the iPhone X. When we went to real-world tests, it actually felt like we couldn't find an app with enough processor demands to come close to challenging the A12 Bionic. Fortnite loads about 15 seconds faster on the iPhone XS than on the iPhone X, and gameplay seemed basically perfect. Where the A12 Bionic really shined, however, wasn't the CPU, but rather the GPU. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, for instance, is only using half as much of the GPU on the XS as it does on the X. Apple has boosted the neural engine on the A12 Bionic to handle up to 5 trillion processes per second, and is offering up those capabilities to third-party app builders for the first time ever. So it's safe to assume that it might take months or even years before app developers unlock the full capabilities of the A12 Bionic. That means if you're thinking about upgrading from the iPhone X or an earlier model, the iPhone XS has some future-proof qualities that will convince you to keep it around for years to come. Now for what makes the iPhone XS immediately special, the camera. The dual camera module on the iPhone XS comes with bigger sensors and an improved flash. A teardown from iFixit says that the iPhone XS wide-angle sensor is 32% larger than the one on the iPhone X. This should mean that the iPhone XS camera is capable of capturing more visual information and performing better in low light. Check out this image of a city street at night. The iPhone XS camera picks up the textures and the details of what's illuminated by the streetlights, as well as the restaurant sign, down to the lettering. Here's the same shot from an iPhone X. The street looks pretty good, but the lit up restaurant sign is blown out. Another new feature with the iPhone XS is an improved portrait mode. Like the iPhone X, you can take a photo of someone or something, and the distance between the two lenses, as well as some software tricks, enable you to create a bokeh effect that keeps the foreground in focus and blurs the layers of the background. On the iPhone XS, however, you can also adjust that bokeh effect after you take the photo. Adjusting the f-stop on this toggle here, I can make the background sharper or more blurry. I'm not really adjusting the f-stop, but the software creates that effect. In general, photos look a bit more saturated and contrasty on the iPhone XS, which is probably because of how Apple updated the camera's HDR features. The camera is undeniably different, but it's not quite perfect. Low light photos should be sharper with the larger sensor on the iPhone XS, but when you zoom in, it's easy to see how the iPhone XS camera struggles to maintain detail in darker environments. The contours of the face in this portrait end up looking blurry close up, which might be a technique Apple uses to keep the zoomed out image looking less noisy. All that said, the iPhone XS and the iPhone X are still pretty similar devices, except for one thing: the iPhone XS Max and its stupid huge screen. If that's what you want, you can't get it on any other iPhone. If you want a slightly better camera and a hypothetically awesome processor, you might also like the iPhone XS. But if you already own an iPhone X, you probably don't need to upgrade. If you own any other iPhone, stay tuned. The iPhone XR comes with a lot of the perks that we've been talking about with the iPhone XS, but we won't know how good it is until we've tested it out, and Apple won't release it for another month. So as cool as the iPhone XS and XS Max are, it's worth waiting a few more weeks to get all the info about all the new iPhones.